There is a hideous monster growing in this country and throughout the world. It is a very real Jekyll and Hyde story, which oddly enough began at Jekyll Island, Georgia in 1910. The schemers of this plot include the Rothschilds and Warburgs from Europe, along with the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan of the United States. You should know that the Federal Reserve is an intentionally deceptive name. It is not federal, but made up of these same elite families that have owned it since 1913. What is more, there is no reserve. These elite families have absolutely no liability with respect to the Federal Reserve. Instead, you and I and Americans throughout this country form the only backing for the money, the currency, that is part of the Federal Reserve. When they make mistakes, we pay. When they plot against us, we pay more. Our petition has been filed with petitions.whitehouse.gov. With it, we seek to end the most corrosive, corrupt, and devious power in this country. This petition is not Democrat, Republican, Independent, Liberal, or Conservative. We will all benefit by the end of the Federal Reserve. Does it not seem odd that while we audit, manage, and oversee Boeing when it produces fighter jets for us, we have done nothing of the sort with the Federal Reserve, which has not been audited since 1913. Trillionaire Federal Reserve owners manipulate their puppets to do their bidding. Corrupt politicians, devious lobbyists, bloated super PACs, the corporate mainstream media, multinational corporations, and crooked government leaders throughout the world all do their bidding. Their mission is to have absolute control over this world. Adam Weishaupt, Henry Kissinger, George Soros, and generations of Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Warburgs, and members of the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, have told us as much over and over. Why do we not listen? In response to the 2008 recession, Congress authorized $700 billion for a bank bailout. But without any authorization whatsoever, that same Federal Reserve issued $29 trillion to major national banks and, yes, even international banks. Those same banks, which in 2008 the Fed told us were too big to fail, are now vastly larger and more vulnerable. Any major bank that would fail now would take down the entire economy of this country and perhaps the world. The crashes of 1929 and 2008 were deviously designed, not economic accidents. The bankers made billions, while average Americans throughout this country lost their jobs, their savings, and their homes. Ask yourself this: if they had us in mind, why is it that the bankers profited greatly from these crashes while millions of Americans lost life savings, homes, and jobs? Clean, productive factories and jobs were moved overseas to exploit cheap third world labor and lax environmental regulation. Without control of our national money supply, we cannot rein in these vast global corporations. With good reason, Dwight Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. Warmongering bankers have fomented conflict and financed terrorists worldwide. They make vast profits from war and use war to gain access and control of territories, resources, and markets they covet. We pay with lives and capital, and they profit. Nothing corrupts like money. With it they have bribed, blackmailed, and bought off the presidency, Congress, state, and local officials. They must be investigated for corruption, price fixing, racketeering, sex and drug trafficking, insider trading, bribery, blackmail, and yes, treason. They must be indicted, tried, and convicted if found guilty. There is precedent for removing these pit vipers. In 1836, President Andrew Jackson terminated the last privately owned central bank in this country. Jackson faced assassination attempts and narrowly escaped death when he challenged the privately owned banking system. Not coincidentally, Presidents Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, who both opposed the central bankers, were assassinated. Today, our Second Amendment and our collective will are all that stand in their way. Legislation passed by Congress and signed by the President will end this evil. A publicly owned central bank within the United States Treasury, answerable only to us, can replace it. Sign this petition. Together, millions of us will demand action. We will remind the President of his promise to drain the swamp. Should even these efforts fail, we will force our agenda and swamp the system. We will advance this movement with demonstrations and marches. Raise your voices now and be heard across America. Together, we cannot be denied. Visit endthefedreserve.com or go directly to petitions.whitehouse.gov and sign End the Federal Reserve to become a part of this great patriotic movement. Thanks.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Say
it one more time, it's a little bit sweeter.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.